Welcome everyone to today's Lunch and Learn webinar, Reporting Options for Microsoft Dynamics NAV, brought to you by ArcherPoint. Today's webinar will be presented by ArcherPoint Management Consulting Lead, Jeff Foss. Working with Dynamics NAV since 2000, Jeff has been in both Controller and Director of Finance roles, affording him extensive experience working with business analytics and supporting technologies. In today's webinar, Jeff will discuss the importance of data and reporting strategies and the questions you need to ask to build those strategies. He will then demonstrate Power BI. So without further ado, Jeff, over to you.
Thanks, Suzanne. So as Suzanne mentioned, my name is Jeff Foss. I am the ArcherPoint Management Consulting Practice Lead. And in a little bit, we will see a little bit of Power BI and be able to take your questions then. And before that, I will be discussing the importance of having a thorough data and information strategy. So challenging today's ideas of corporate performance. This is what this is my role at ArcherPoint. And to do that, we have to kind of think about information. Information, as Peter Drucker defines it, is data endowed with relevance and purpose. So with this comes a data strategy. The data strategy describes how data is collected, stored, transformed, distributed, and consumed. Along with that is your information and reporting strategy, which governs the processes and rules that convert data into information. Raw data, such as customer retention rates, sales figures, and supply costs, is really of limited value until it has been integrated with other data, transformed into information that can guide decision making. So let's talk about what a data strategy is. A data strategy is a coherent strategy for organizing, governing, analyzing, and deploying an organization's information assets. Think of it as a plumbing for your company. This provides the data for the visuals and reports and is vital for high performance. There are two aspects of data strategy, defensive and offensive. Defensive ensures that your data has security, privacy, integrity, quality, regulatory compliance, and governance. The mitigation of corporate risk by ensuring that the integrity of your data flowing through your internal systems. Offensive improves your competitive position and profitability. So the offensive aspect focuses on business objectives. For example, increasing revenue, profitability, etc. Typically includes activities that generate customer insights, data analysis and modeling, for example, or it's integrated with disparate customer and market data to support managerial decision-making through, for instance, interactive dashboards. So you can kind of think of your defensive data strategy as your single source of truth. This is where all data resides. All data is pulled from for reports and information. And your offensive can be thought of as multiple versions of the truth, with the underlying data set being that single source of truth. Why do I need a data strategy? Well, first of all, you need a data strategy to identify and understand its meaning, regardless of the structure, origin, or location. This establishes a means to identify and represent the content. Data values have to have a name, a defined format, and a value representation. By creating a data glossary and metadata to identify data, helps you to find the data and use it efficiently in the future. You also need a data strategy for governance. Governance ensures that the data is managed consistently across the company. You also need to have it so that you know where you're going to store it, and you're going to store it in a structure and location that supports easy shared access and processing. You also need to be able to package that data so that it can be reused and shared, and provide rules and access guidelines for the data across the company. So information and reporting strategy. ERP systems, as we all know, are great repositories of data, but they may not be sufficient in reporting on that data. My old boss used to say that the ERP system is data rich, but information poor. Users have different needs when it comes to this information. And having a thoroughly planned data and information architecture is key to not only a successful ERP implementation, but also to be able to run your company successfully. So with that, let me give you some information on different products. So first, data warehousing. So there are really two primary data warehousing tools for NAV. You have SQL Server Analysis Services, which is the bread and butter of Microsoft SQL Server. It is a very powerful tool, but it requires a lot of knowledge of SQL to be able to build that data warehouse. Jet Analytics is built for NAV. It is a data warehousing tool that is actually built on top of SQL Server, uses SSAS, SQL Server Analysis Services, and SQL Server Integration Services. And it provides a graphical interface and an easy to use interface to easily build those data warehouses. So data warehouse, when do I really want to build a data warehouse, and when would I have the need for one? There's several different times. So when you have multiple data sources that you need information from that have disparate data information or data definitions, what this means is that you have, say CRM, and you have a NAV where CRM calls customer an account and NAV calls it, well, customer. And so you need to be able to have a data warehouse which will then pull those in, be able to normalize both of those together and report off of that same information. Another reason, when transaction levels are very high in your company and you do not want to denigrate performance of the live database when running reports. So if you have a lot of history, if you've been on NAV for a long period of time, gone through 2 or 3 upgrades, you have a lot of data. And when you run, for instance, an inventory report or an inventory transaction report, that could take a long, long time and could potentially slow down the other users in the system. And the last one would be scalability. So what scalability means, again, if you have history, you're bringing on, say, you're a manufacturer and you have databases for your machines, other databases and other data sources, or maybe you buy a company and to be able to pull an extra ERP system into yours, that's when you want to be able to use a data warehouse where you can normalize that data and report off of that data to the whole company. All right, so understanding our information needs. So to me, there's 5 questions that you need to ask. The first 3 are the most important, and what these questions, the answers to these questions will answer what you need to do with your information. How do you need to report it? How do you need to distribute it, etc. So the first 3 questions are, what problems are you trying to solve? The next one is, who is your audience? And then, how will the information be consumed? So there are many different problems that you might want to solve. And what information do you need to have immediately versus periodically? Are there reports that management wants to take time to pull out, or takes time to pull out all the information? So accounting has to go take information from this source and then from this source, put it all together and report on daily sales or weekly sales. And then how is that information to be consumed? So you might have a CEO that wants to see all this information on a dashboard. You might have your warehouse manager who wants to see everything that's shipped out by order, because he's making sure that what he's counted in the warehouse matches what the system says. So all of these are going to come into play as to your information needs. And then what, if anything, you might need to supplement what you currently have. So whether it's NAV, whether I'm going to buy a data warehousing tool like Jet Analytics, or if I'm going to buy a dashboarding tool like Power BI or something else. And so these needs help you build the case to then determine what your budget is. So the company might say, you got a couple $1,000s to spend on this, but if you can build a business case and want to spend more than that, that's what these questions and answering these questions will provide. So you can determine what your budget is, how you need to go about building the business case and getting that software. And then lastly, you need to determine what is your expertise, either company-wide or individually. Can you handle learning a new software, the language of that software, or do you want to outsource that to somebody else initially and then learn it? So let's talk about visualization tools. So there are many visualization tools out there on the market. Obviously, Power BI is Microsoft and is being pushed and developed on a consistent basis by Microsoft. Excel, every accountant in the world uses Excel. It's a very powerful tool and can be used extensively for visualization. Now, the last two are Tableau and Qlik. Qlik has a Qlik view and Tableau. Both of these are visualization tools that are very similar to Power BI in that they pull the data, they extract the data, transform it, and load it into their system to visualize it and show it in a dashboard format. The issue is Tableau and Qlik View, they all have their individual proprietary languages. So you'd have to learn a brand new language. If you've ever used Power Pivot in Excel, then you can use Power BI very quickly as they use the same language. Let's talk a little bit about NAV. So what NAV provides out of the box? You have count schedules. Basically, these are financial statements. They also have analysis reports where you can pull in sales, inventory, purchases, get good data there. They have over 700 canned reports. You can use filtered views, query objects. Graphs of these query objects can be seen in role centers. And also in role centers, you can embed Power BI reports. Now, embedding the Power BI reports is really in the last two versions, 17 and 18, and then going into Business Central. Queries, the graphs, that started in version 2013 and has only been enhanced. Your query objects were also released in 2013. The really nice thing about these query objects is you can actually access those via OData feeds. So when you publish those web services for the OData, you can then pull in pretty quickly and easily into, say, Power BI. So let's talk about pros and cons of NAV reporting. So NAV is the repository for the reports, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? So because it is the repository for the reports, the permissions for those reports are all set by the permissions for the user within NAV. Financial statements can be run in NAV and provide drill down capabilities so that you can see what's making up those numbers. What that also means is you can very quickly determine where things might be off from either a previous year or from budget. Most companies really only need a few small tweaks to the canned reports to make these reports work for them. And then analysis reports can be exported into pivot tables to provide more robust reporting. And in 2018 and higher, you can actually link these through Excel services and have Excel automatically update from these. Cons from reporting in NAV. So to be able to create a report in NAV, you need to have a thorough understanding of the underlying data structure within NAV. The RDLC in NAV is a cumbersome reporting tool at best. It's not very intuitive, and not everybody wants to learn how to use that. Reports do not automatically update. They do need to be run. So, you can't just open up a dashboard and see a report within NAV. You need to have a user. So every time you want to run a report, you're actually going to use a user and a license. So you may have to do that at certain times of the day, depending on the number of licenses that you have. And it really only caters to those people who need detailed reports. So you don't get, graphical representation. You can. They're a little bit tricky, but you can get that. But I think there's other easier ways that you can do that. And then reports are always run on the live database. So again, a long-running report, an inventory to GL reconcile report, for instance, could denigrate your performance. So other reporting tools that are out there, you have Excel. You have Jet Reports, which is an Excel add-in. And what that does is that allows you to pull data, query the data in the NAV database, and pull it into Excel based on business logic. And Jet Reports is built specifically for NAV, so it has a lot of the table integrations and getting the right syntax and the right data definitions already built in, so it makes it a lot easier to build. You have reporting services, and you also have Crystal Reports. So one of the things with all of these is every single one of them, except for maybe Excel, comes with a web portal. So you can have a report repository for all of these different software products that allow you to put specific reports in a folder for this person or this group of people, for accounting, for the warehouse, for purchasing, etc., to be able to run these reports. Now, again, these are reports, so in order to get the current data, you do have to run them. But in the web portals, you can schedule them to run automatically. Excel kind of has a web portal. It's called SharePoint, but again, that can be utilized as that web portal. So there are two other types of software. It's two types of what's called a corporate performance management software. And what these softwares do is they allow you the ability to pull in data from disparate sources, not really a data warehouse, but they're more geared towards either your general ledger information. So you could pull in two different ERP systems, pull them in, have a similar mapping for your GL accounts, pull that data in, and then report off of it. So they're really kind of like consolidation softwares. But there's two types of them. One's financial, one's strategic. The main difference is in the strategic corporate performance management softwares, you get the ability to add personnel or workforce data and sales data. So instead of just looking at your GL information, you're looking at your sales by items and by customers, and you're also being able to add new personnel, and change salaries, etc., so you can get a better vision for your modeling for the future. So if your revenues, you're forecasting your revenues to increase 200%, well, you're going to have to add personnel to help with that. So the strategic helps you to model that much better and easier. So some of the financial corporate performance management solutions, you have Host Analytics, Profix, and Blackline. You know, Blackline is a really big general ledger piece of software that allows kind of easy to close process when you have multiple ERP systems to work through that month-end close and to report from it. And then the strategic corporate performance management solutions, BI360, you know, they have a full circle of software from budgeting, forecasting, all the way down to that financial and strategic modeling. And Adaptive Insights has pretty much the same suite of solutions. All right. So key takeaways from all of this. So one, develop a strategy. Start simple, create a data policy which will govern how your data is entered, maintained, and kind of that data dictionary so that you don't have multiple data sources that have customers with one has Inc. in it, one has incorporated, etc. So that's what that strategy, at least start there so that you have something governing that data entry. Second is determine your data consumers. Who consumes the most data and information in your company? What are their needs? You know, can you get away with just a dashboard and going on the offensive? Or, you know, at some point you may have to get some part of your strategy in the defensive mode so that you're making sure that, you know, you pass your audits. And if you have, you know, other regulatory compliance outside of just getting audited by the accounting firm, you know, that's where you need to get on that defensive part of that strategy. Assess your company's ability to manage the solution. So do you need to hire an outside company or can you handle this internally? Do you have the proper data storage and the proper repository to be able to handle you know, the data coming in and being held in one place? Are you know, how are you going to share that data with everybody? And of course, lastly, you know, keep it simple. Start small up front, and with small wins, you will be able to garner support for doing more. And so the more small wins that you can get, the easier this will become. And you know, this is not a data strategy is not a all at one time type of thing. It is definitely an iterative process. And with that, I am going to demonstrate Power BI. So the first thing I'm going to show you is a Power BI dashboard. So Power BI is broken up into really 3 different elements. You have a data set. From that data set, you create reports. And from those reports, you create a dashboard. A dashboard in Power BI can consist of tiles, bits of information from multiple reports. So what I'm showing here is a fairly typical finance dashboard. You know, I've got my revenue to budget, checking on my gross margin. I've got my AR balance, the amount over 60 days, because over 60 days is important to me. I've got my sales by salesperson. I've got my operating expenses, revenue over time, and then my revenue by customer. So each one of these either comes from the same report or from a different report. So if we click on one, because I want to see the underlying data, it goes to the report. And so in this report has all the same metrics. So here's my revenue to budget, my cost of goods to budget, which gets me down to my gross margin. It also allows me to filter and change what I'm looking at. So I can look at the year, I can look at a specific month, Okay, I can even look at a specific quarter, see what that looks like. So the idea is that the dashboard gives a general overview, and if there's something wrong, I can go into the report and figure out from the report what might be happening. So back here in this dashboard, we can also go down to the sales amount by salesperson. We can look at this, and we'd see all the different key metrics we have for our sales reps. I can even filter to a specific sales rep, see what their sales are on an annual basis, what type of customers they primarily deal with, etc. Okay. One of the other things we can do with Power BI is we could ask a question about the data. And what it does is it allows you to ask specific questions that are kind of, I can take my salesperson and see that information and shuffle through my salespeople. So this is a way that you can get an ad hoc dashboard or visual for your data. The other nice thing is Power BI does have a phone app. And so as you build your dashboard, you can also build this in the phone view, and you can see that all those tiles that I had just kind of go down in a row, or I guess it's a column. And so this is if you were to have the app on your iPhone or Android, this is how it would show on that particular phone. So back to here, you know what, let's kind of show a little bit about Power BI Desktop. So Power BI has two elements to it. It has what you're seeing here, which is the website, which is called the service. So it's a Power BI service, which is part of Azure. And it's a website that is published to from Power BI Desktop. So in Power BI Desktop, really what you can do is, this is how you build your data model. And the way that Power BI wants you to build your data is in a star schema. So what that means is that I have one fact table. Okay, this has all my information in it. So this is my sales. And then each one of these is tied to a certain dimension on the outside. So it's tied to a calendar dimension, a product dimension, customer dimension, etc. And then all of these are related in such a way that I can then pull reports off of them and be able to get my customer sales, by a period of time, and my item sales by a period of time, etc. Okay, so, and then once you're ready and you've built reports, so the highest up that a Power BI Desktop will go is to build a report. And so in that report, once you've got that built, you publish it, and then you can see it on the service. One of the other things that you can do in Power BI is, so from Power BI Desktop, you can define what specific users can see, and you can filter content to what they can see. I've got this dashboard that's built by this particular sales rep, and we can So the idea would be is that if I was to filter the data to a particular sales rep, that when that sales rep were to log in and look at their dashboard, all they would see is the data for them, or what they're allowed to see. You can do the same thing for a sales manager or territory manager. Territory manager might have 2 or 3 sales reps underneath them. So he's going to look at all of their data, but he won't be able to see the whole company's data. So just, and they call this role level security. And that concludes my demonstration for Power BI. And with that, I will open up the question and answer.
All right, thanks so much, Jeff. Do you have a couple questions that have come in? The first one is, what's the major difference between Power BI and JET?
So the major difference between Power BI and JET is, so I guess it depends on which version of JET we're talking about, but let's start with JET Reports. So JET Reports is an Excel add-in, which you can generate the data and generate a report, or you can generate a table and report off of that. Now, within Excel, you can actually build a dashboard. You can build the graphical representations. You can have the slicers in there. You can have even the spark lines. You can do a pretty good job of building that dashboard. But the issue is you don't have a way to present that, although you could use it if you had that in SharePoint. I suppose you could use Excel services and present that data. But that data doesn't necessarily automatically update. You know, I'm sure there's a way that you could probably do that. But the biggest difference is Power BI is really just a visualization tool. So it's the ability to give a dashboard to somebody, have that person log into a website or even on their phone and see that dashboard and see the information underlying it without having to open up an Excel file to be able to, you know, one, run the data and then see that visualization dashboard. So I guess the main difference is JET Reports is in Excel, so no matter what, you're going to have to run it to upload or update the data, refresh the data. You can have the visualization, you can have that there, but again, you have to open up the file and run it to get the refresh of the data. Whereas Power BI, it is just a visualization, so you're not going to be able to get the full details. I mean, you could, it'd just be a really huge, ugly report within a web page, but you could do it to get that actual detail. Now, the other part of JET Reports, or I guess JET Global now, is JET Analytics. JET Analytics is what everybody used to know as JET Enterprise and is the data warehousing tool. That is, all it is a data warehouse. So it's a way to pull in disparate systems, normalize the data, get it into a data warehouse, and then something like a Power BI would use that cube that it builds as its data source to then be able to do the visualizations for it. Now, what you can do in Power BI, which is the ETL, the extract, transform, and load piece of a data warehouse, you can do all of that stuff in Power BI. The problem becomes when you have, you know, you want to do sales, you can do that. You want to do warehouse and the warehouse transactions, that's got to be a separate one. And then you want to do, say, the purchasing side, that's got to be another one. You want to do the accounting side, that's got to be a fourth one. So now you have 4 different Power BI files doing all that extraction, transforming, and loading. And what Jet Analytics does is that puts it all into one place. And so I can build all of those in one place, build 5 or 6 OLAP cubes for all the different places, and then use each one of those as a data source then for Power BI visualization. So Jet Analytics does not do visualization. Does that answer your questions?
I think so. And then, I think it might answer a good bit of our next question too, which is, can you discuss more about accessing data with Power BI?
Sure.
Just don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit.
So sure, accessing data. So I guess it all depends on where we want to access the data from. So with Power BI Desktop, when we define, we're connecting to stuff within our network, and you can connect to a SQL Server database, analysis services database, OData feeds. So NAV, you define and publish a web service for OData for a specific query. You can access that through the OData feeds. And then they come out with more and more all the time as to what types of data. I mean, you can go to an Excel table, text file, any of these, MySQL database, they're pretty much getting to the point where you can get an access to just about any type of database. You can actually access SharePoint lists. There's some caveats to these, right? So like Excel, it's going to want to pull from a file that is on, it's tied to Office 365, right? So as long as it's able to access it, because when you're in Power BI Desktop, you're actually getting that visualization up into the web, which is on the service. And then that service has to be able to pull from somewhere. And so typically you want your Excel files, the other files, to be up on a something that's on the web. So the SharePoint site. And that's why they really want you on a SharePoint list, for instance, it has to be online SharePoint. Okay, so it's wanting you to have that type of stuff. They are actually building live connections to Business Central. They're also building apps for that. So all of the canned Power BI stuff will be in an app if you're on Business Central that you can download and pull in and make changes to. It's just going to be basic information.
Awesome, thanks. I've got one more question here. What is the effort to set up a Power BI dashboard like the typical one you showed earlier? How much time does it typically take to set up something?
So it depends on what the data source is. So if you're if you're on a NAV version 2017 or higher, where it's got those OData feeds and it's got some of the pre-built queries for Power BI in there, it shouldn't take but maybe an hour. The idea is you gotta have a pretty good understanding of what data you want to provide and how you want to kind of visualize that data. Is it going to be in a bar graph? Is it going to be in a bar and line graph? Is it a pie chart? Is it just in a matrix form where I have rows and columns? So that's the first. Once you understand that, getting the data built into here, you have to build this fact table. So with a query, you can do that pretty quickly, because in that query you can combine two different tables. So say you want my invoices. So you got to have the sales invoice table and you got to have the sales credit memo table to get your returns. So those have to build your table. And then you got to just build your arms of the star, so your other dimensions. So I'd say it'd probably take 1 to 2 hours to get a fairly decent dashboard up and running. Now, if you have just sales, that's going to be one step. If you want the AR in there and the GL stuff in there, you might have to do that 2 or 3 times. So again, it takes a little bit of time, but the nice thing is once you've got it done initially, and all you have to do is tweak it in the future. So there's going to be a little bit of upfront, but I guess it really depends on what version of NAV you're on. So if you're on an older version where it's just SQL, and you don't have all the stuff that comes with the new versions of NAV, all the nice integration points and the OData feeds, that's going to be probably a little bit longer, because you can't build that query in NAV. You have to actually build it in here in Power BI, and then transform a lot of the data.
Thanks, Jeff. It definitely helps us understand what the effort that goes in there into building this out. I think that's all the questions we have for today. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. I hope you found this webinar informative, and thank you, Jeff, for your insights.
Thanks for watching this ArcherPoint video. If you found it helpful, make sure to check out our website and blog at www.archerpoint.com. Additionally, if you have any questions regarding our products, services, or information in this video, feel free to email us at info@archerpoint.com. Thanks.